This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it's Monday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. It's December now, and if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, it's starting to get a whole lot colder. I thought it would be a good time to take a look at freeze effects in Magic. Now, freeze is not an official Magic keyword or anything like that, but it is a term that Wizards R&D uses when they're designing and testing cards to refer to an effect that taps a creature and then prevents it from untapping for at least a turn. Mark Rosewater has used this term numerous times, including in the 2021 Mechanical Color Pie article. Note that tapping has to be part of the effect. A card that just keeps a creature from untapping isn't freezing as far as Wizards R&D is concerned. And yeah, we see freezing in pretty much every set, like on Crimson Vow's Chill of the Grave. It's an effect that in the current Mechanical Color Pie only appears in blue, but in the past we saw it pretty regularly on white cards, and we've even seen it on a few green cards. Freeze effects can be pretty nice because they act as a form of temporary removal, but often cost significantly less than traditional removal would. To be eligible for this list, a card had to be able to tap a creature or creatures and keep it from untapping for at least one untap step. Cards that just tap a creature or just keep it from untapping were not eligible. This type of effect appears on 272 cards, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes major events like Pro Tours, Mythic Championships, and Set Championships. And a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, and this is events like Grand Prix and Magic Fests. At number 10, it's Sleep. Sleep freezes, or I guess flavor-wise in this case, puts to sleep all of your opponent's creatures. This can really open the door for aggressive decks to do a ton of damage that they just couldn't do before. While it was printed in several core sets, including M10, M11, and M13, it didn't actually gain any points until a reprint in M19. This was largely because the earlier formats didn't have blue aggro decks, but the standard of M19 had a powerful mono blue aggro deck, and Sleep for that deck could often just end the game, sort of feeling like a fireball for lethal, and for less mana in most cases. So far, all of its points came in that standard format. It has seen some play in Pioneer Simic aggro decks, but hasn't gained any points in the format so far. It does have a decent chance of gaining more points in the future, though. At number 9, it is Singing Bell Strike. It has the exact same score as Sleep, but it gets the higher slot because it had a higher average finish in the events it got top 8s at. There are lots of blue auras that freeze things, and Singing Bell Strike is one of the most efficient ones we've ever seen. It locks a creature down for more than one turn too. Because of that, it does come with a bit of a downside. Your opponent can eventually pay 6 mana to untap the frozen creature. Still, that's a hefty amount of mana, and oftentimes by the time your opponent would have been able to do it, they're just dead because it takes so long to get to 6 mana. Singing Bell Strike gained its points in Azorius and Temur aggro decks in Standard, where this having the ability to very efficiently get a blocker out of the way was welcome. It doesn't have any points since rotating out of Standard though, and it doesn't look like it has a super bright future. At number 8, it is Encase in Ice, the first of several cards on the list that freeze things and have a name that involves the cold. This is another freeze effect aura that only costs 2 mana, and it even has flash. The downside is it can only target red or green creatures, but against creatures of those two colors, it's quite powerful. It was played in the sideboards of a lot of blue decks in the Standard of 2015 and 2016. It's another card that doesn't have a great chance of seeing more play in the future, though. At number 7, it is Ice Fall Regent, a creature that freezes a creature for as long as it stays in play. It has the same number of points as Encase in Ice, but has more first-tier top 8s, so it gets the higher spot. And yeah, that's a pretty powerful enter the battlefield ability on a dragon that can also really threaten your opponent in the air, and it's even kind of hard to kill since it makes your opponent pay more mana if they want to target it with a spell. If you know me, you know I love creatures that freeze things when they enter the battlefield, especially in Limited, since they let you add to the board while effectively subtracting from your opponents, which gives you a huge edge in the game. The Regent gained all of its points in Dragon control decks while it was in Standard. These decks were loaded up with various Dragon synergies and powerful dragons like the Regent, so you can see how it was useful there. It hasn't gained any points since rotating out of Standard though. At number 6, it is Fall from Favor. This freeze aura makes interesting use of the Monarch mechanic. If you're the Monarch, you get to draw a card on every one of your end steps, so being the Monarch is quite powerful. Your opponent can become the monarch if one of their creatures ever hits you, but when you play this on your own turn, it's effectively a cantrip, and that's a pretty strong thing to put on a removal spell. It gets pretty close to giving you a 2 for 1. Additionally, because you probably froze your opponent's best creature, they're going to have a hard time becoming the monarchs themselves, so there's a decent chance you'll draw more than one card off of this. This is a very powerful common, so powerful that it got banned in Pauper in early 2021, but that hasn't stopped it from gaining points. It's been played in Legacy and Vintage, and has a great shot at gaining more points going forward. At number 5, it is Winter's Rest. This is another freeze aura, and this one goes the deepest on the freeze flavor of all the cards on this list, because it's a snow permanent, and it only truly freezes the creature if you have another snow permanent in play. Like Fall from Favor, this is a powerful common, so it's no surprise it's seen a lot of play in Pauper. Pauper has some other powerful snow payoffs too, like Skred, and the two of them help power snow decks in the format. It also sees some play in Delver decks in Pauper. So far, all of its points have come in that format, but it's still pretty likely to gain more points going forward. At number 4, it is Tomio, the Moon Sage, a planeswalker that comes with a +1 ability that can freeze any permanent. If you use it on a creature, that ability does a good job of protecting her. Her -2 also combos nicely with freeze effects, as it can draw you a card for every tapped creature your opponent controls, and most likely they'll have at least one because of that +1 ability. She also has a pretty absurd ultimate, which gives you an emblem that lets you return any card that goes to your graveyard to your hand, and this includes everything, including instants and sorceries, so the value this gives you is pretty hard to beat. Tomio was well suited for control decks, and she gained all of her points in them in both block and standard. She hasn't seen play since 2013, so she may be in trouble in maintaining a spot on this list in the long run. At number 3, it is Kiora Bests the Sea God. Chapter 2 on this saga freezes all of your opponent's non-land permanents, which is really great, especially because Chapter 1 gives you an 8/8 hexproof Kraken, and that creature makes sure that you have a good chance to get to the later chapters. And of course, if you freeze all of your opponent's stuff when you have an 8/8 Kraken in play, there's a good chance you're hitting them for 8 on the next turn. And then of course this has a Chapter 3, which is even more powerful than the first two chapters because it's a mind control effect. So this does all kinds of crazy powerful things, and the only real limitation of the card is its high mana cost. Kiora Best the Sea God was played in standard Yorion Ultimatum decks, which were one of the most dominant decks in the format. It combos quite well with both Yorion and the Ultimatum. With Yorion, you can potentially reset it to Chapter 1 in situations where another Kraken suits you, or you want to freeze your opponent's stuff for another turn, and it also makes for a really great card to search up when you cast Emergent Ultimatum. Kiora Best the Sea God hasn't gained any points outside of standard just yet, but it is being played in Ultimatum decks and Historic, and could gain some points in the future. At number 2, it is Dungeon Geists, which, like Fall Regent, freezes a creature when it enters the battlefield, and keeps it that way, as long as it remains in play. The freeze effect really makes the Geist feel like a 4-mana 3/3 flyer that kills a creature, and that's pretty great. The Geist coming down can frequently have an immediate impact on the board by tapping down the opponent's best blocker, and the Geists also really interferes with any race you and your opponent were having. Meanwhile, it can swing away for 3 in the air. In block, Dungeon Geist was played in Azorius aggro decks. In standard, it was played in blue-white aggro and Delver decks. It hasn't gained any points since 2012. And at number 1, it's Tidebinder Mage, a merfolk that can freeze red and green creatures for as long as it remains in play, so it's basically a much cheaper version of Fall Regent and Dungeon Geists. And yeah, it isn't as imposing of a creature, and it can only target some creatures, but it has a really great creature type as a merfolk. While it might look like it would mostly be a sideboard card, it's actually gained the majority of its points in the main deck. It doesn't always have a target to tap down, but it has one often enough that standard Devotion to blue decks were pretty happy to run it, especially because at its worst it was a 2-mana 2/2 that still added 2 to your Devotion in the early game. The same has been true in modern merfolk decks, where if it doesn't have a target, it still provides you with an additional merfolk for all of your deck's various tribal synergies. It even gained a point in a vintage merfolk deck earlier this year. It isn't gaining points at an incredible rate or anything, but it is still gaining them, and it currently holds the number 1 spot on this list, so it's in pretty good shape to remain there. Well, those are the 10 cards that freeze creatures that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you want to own any of these cards, you can buy them at Card Kingdom. In the description, you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in this video. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past MTG Top 10s, and there are over 420 of them, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting my channel, you can on Patreon. Thanks for watching.